It was over 20 years ago that I took a class in interpersonal communication, and it really changed the way I saw, the way I showed up, the way I interacted with people forever. I can't wait to share this information with you, so we're going to break it into chunks. But let's jump into interpersonal relationship. We want to define really what it is, and simply, it's two-way communication. Inter, between two people. It is a close communication that is irreplaceable. So when we're in an interpersonal relationship, because that person is unique, we won't have another relationship like it. The dynamic is so different. And the goal in an interpersonal relationship is to know, I treat you differently because I know you. So we treat each other unique because this is a specific person. And some of my communication strategies might not work with this person in the same way that it works with another person. I have 3 kids, so my interpersonal relationship with each of them is so unique and so dynamic. Let's go on to the second learning objective. We want to look at types of messages, and here's what I want you, if you're writing notes down, to understand. And this, I hope, will make a lot of sense in all of your communication. We send and receive messages all the time. When we're sending and receiving messages between two people, we need to know that is two-dimensional. So we have the content that we're sending, but we also have the relational piece. And that relational piece has a lot of aspects to it. So let's look at some of how that relational piece adds a layer. To every interpersonal relationship we have a level of affinity. If you're taking notes in parentheses, you might write the word liking, or like how much I like this person often will determine how I receive messages from them. Or if I don't like them, if I'm listening closely to them. I have a level of respect for each of the people I'm in a relationship with. Again, how much I respect them or how little will affect how I receive their messages. Think back to that communication model. We have a sender, we have a receiver, we have this thing called noise that's intercepting, and sometimes disrespect can create some noise. Immediacy. So that one is a little bit different because it is how interested I am in what the other person is saying. So I want you to think about someone who texts you. You immediately get excited and you text them right back. Immediately you text them back because you are interested in engaging in a conversation with them. There are probably people in your life that you maybe hold off. You don't respond immediately because you're not really that interested in engaging. The other piece that's not quite as fun to talk about is control. We have a sort of a power distribution, or in most relationships, one person tends to have control. In romantic relationships, we like to believe that it's 50-50, often not. But in friendships, sometimes someone has what we call the upper hand. Again, that changes how we do that. So I want you to think, take a minute. If you're taking notes, I want you to think about a conversation that you've had recently. And I want you to think about the message that was exchanged, or the words that were exchanged. What did you talk about, right? Was it a healthy conversation, maybe unhealthy? So I want you to write the content, like just the words that were being shared or the exchange that was happening, ideally face-to-face, right? But it could have been FaceTime, or what we call mediated. Then I want you to think about the relational piece. So on a scale of 1 to 10, or you could use the terms help or hurt. So I want to go back through those things, and I want you to think about the person you were talking to and the words that were exchanged. Did your affinity or liking for them increase how well you felt connected, or did it help or hurt? Did your respect for that person help or hurt the communication? So maybe if you disrespect your boss, right, you're in an interpersonal relationship, it may have not helped the message or the exchange. Immediacy. How interested were you in engaging in the conversation specifically with that person? Did it help or hurt? And then I want you to think about this idea of control. Who do you feel like, if you were really honest, who has more control in that relationship? So, for example, if someone's interrupting a lot and the other person doesn't say anything, or someone tends to make more decisions in that relationship, who kind of has control? In a boss-employee situation, a lot of times that's easy, but in interpersonal friendships, it can be difficult. So I want you to look at those, and I want you to begin to think about all of your exchanges. How are those relational layers helping or hurting? And what are things you can work on? Okay, we're going to keep taking some notes through this process. I love meta-communication. I explain this to people in everyday life, but meta-communication has some advantages and disadvantages. So I want you to imagine that we live in Texas and we happen to have a lot of crazy fire ants. And if you were to kick a fire ant pile, they go crazy. When I grew up, we called it a hornet's nest. You didn't want to stir up a hornet's nest. Meta-communication is what's happening sort of underneath the surface, and potentially it could be helpful for the conversation. That's an advantage. We're going to explain what it looks like, but if you let people into what you're really struggling with, it can be a disadvantage because it could unearth a lot of things. So if your textbook has a great example of someone being upset that a person is watching a show, and they say, and let's say, for example, they say, can we watch something else? Now, maybe they're not upset about watching the show. What's really happening or going on below the surface is that they are frustrated that you've been binge watching and you're ignoring them. So that's meta communication. It's sort of giving context for what is happening. So we need to know that meta communication is what's happening below the surface. It's the emotional piece. It's what's not really being said, but is what's laying sort of right there. It can do more than solve problems. So sometimes meta communication is great for giving context to a situation. Gosh, yeah. Turns out I'm not upset that you ordered Chinese food. I'm just really upset because I've had a bad day and I'm hungry and all of these things sort of culminated. It can be risky. So if you say, listen, it isn't just about this. It's because for the last 6 months, you never let me decide. And you sort of, you're unearthing a fire anthill or a hornet's nest. This is where meta communication can be unhelpful. So those were the first 3 learning objectives. I want to stop and I want you to go to part 2 because there's so much good information in this chapter that I want to break it into chunks so that it's a little bit easier to digest. So take a break and then let's move on to part 2.